Okay, so I'm going to give you a list of instructions and just try to follow them as best as you can. So first, fold the paper in half. Just fold the paper in half. Okay, now fold the top corner down. Just fold it down. Okay, now fold the other corner down. After you do that, fold it in half again. Kringle, close your eyes.
Classic.
Okay, now fold the first side out. And then lastly, fold the other side out. Okay, so after you're done with that, you can open your eyes, see your creation. Okay, so what is it? A paper? Yeah. All right, so now what we're gonna do is you can put your first piece of paper to the side. Now take your second piece of paper. So this time I'm gonna show you what I'm doing up front, so you can keep your eyes open, and I'm gonna read you the same instructions that I read you the first time. So the first one is fold the paper in half. It was hot dog style. All right, then once you fold the paper in half, you're going to fold the first corner down. It's very hard to do. Okay, and then we're going to fold the second corner down. Oh, this is not paper. And then we're going to fold it in half again. So it should look like this. And then we are going to fold the first side out. It should look like this. And then the last step is folding the other side out. And then after you fold both sides out, you should have a paper airplane. So on the count of 3, if everyone wants to hold up their paper airplane and throw it in the air. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Amazing. Cool. So the beginning of this was just folding paper airplanes, but I promise it has there was a reason why I had you fold paper and give you instructions. So why does someone think that we did this activity? Yes. Okay, what does it highlight about communication though? About how you can communicate with someone, yeah.
The more communication, the better. And how everyone interprets things in different ways.
Yeah. 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 So the biggest thing is people communicate in different ways and people pick up on things in different ways. So you can't just give instructions to someone and like a group of people and expect every single person in the room to know what you're talking about. Sometimes people need visuals. Sometimes people need you to repeat any directions or make directions more clear. The directions I gave you were very vague. I didn't tell you whether to fold it hot dog or hamburger style. I didn't tell you which corner to fold or how long in to fold the corner. So it shows that communication is something that needs to be tailored to every person that you talk to, whether it's a camper, whether it's a counselor, whether it's like faculty and staff here, or our pro staff, or people that work at the campsite. Anyone that we're talking to, you need to tailor your communication to what they need and what they need from you at that moment. So, our training's about communication today, if you couldn't tell. We're going to be talking about nonverbal communication, active listening, and then clear self-expression. And then I'm going to give you just a couple tips at the end for having good communication. So, first, we're going to do some nonverbal communication. So, if my 6 cord members who volunteered can come up and sit in a chair. So, I'm going to be teaching you a little bit about the definition of communication. But while that's happening, I need you to focus on what some of the people here are doing to see if you can pick up on their nonverbals. So, communication, from Latin communis, means to share, is the activity of conveying information through the exchange of thoughts, messages, or information, as by speech, visuals, signals, writing, or behavior. Communication requires a sender, a message, and a recipient, although the receiver does not need to be present or aware of the sender's intent to communicate at the time of communication. Thus, communication can occur across vast distances in time and space. Communication requires that the communicating parties share an area of communicative commonality. The communication process is complete once the receiver has understood the message of the sender. So, thanks guys for listening or not listening to me. So, based on the nonverbals of the 6 people up here, what can you tell me about specific counselors that were sitting up here? Yes. Yeah. So, what does that tell you about songs? Yes, very true. Anything else? Yeah. Yeah. So, from all of the people, we had a few of them paying attention and giving me some nonverbal cues, but some of them not. So, what kind of message, especially the people that were not paying attention, were maybe on their laptops or spinning in a chair, what kind of message does that send to both me, the person speaking, and then the people who are trying to also listen in the room? Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Anyone else? Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a huge respect thing too. So regardless of if it's someone that's in charge of you or a camper, if you're acting like you're not paying attention, like you're not respecting what they're having to say fully. So I think that's something really important to keep in mind, especially with campers, because you need to be attentive to them all the time. So did you know, very exciting, nonverbal cues make up more than half of what we understand from what someone says. So it's not just verbally what they're saying, it's also nonverbals. So that makes up 50% of how you perceive people and how others perceive you in terms of communicating with someone. So especially with campers, as like returners, if you can attest to this, what are the best ways to display nonverbals to campers when you're talking to them? Yeah. Eye contact's really big. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Like nodding if they are talking to you and like pay attention.
And also paying attention because I just said that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Like smiling
great thing that goes along with nonverbals and communicating with people and making sure that people are paying attention is in trainings like these, or even when you're doing things with your campers, making people get up and move and do things can also help make sure that people are paying attention and they're with you 100%. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to play something called People Machine. I know some of you have done this before, but it's super fun and it'll give us a chance to get up and move so that you guys aren't just like listening to me talk this whole time, because that can become a little boring. So I'm going to have you divide up into groups of 4 to 8 people. So I encourage you to be with people that you don't know super well, because we want to make sure that everyone's intermixing and getting the opportunity to meet new people. So, okay, so for those of you who don't know, we're going to be playing People Machine. So People Machine is essentially, as a group, you're going to come up with a type of machine that you want to become as a group. And it has to include motion and sound, and it has to include all of your team members. So you're going to make your People Machine up here, and then we're going to have to guess what machine you are. So I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes to come up with a machine and then figure out ways for every group member to be incorporated with sound and motion. All right, is there a group that just really wants to go first? You guys all raised your hand in the back. So come on up to the front. We have a nice open space for you. Okay, and what's going to work with things like show and tell is they're going to do their machine. So, like, don't guess right away. Like, let them go through a couple of rotations of their motions. And then we're going to guess what it is. Yes.
Are you guys back?
This way. Yes. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. Yes. Thomas has cherry. Yeah. Yeah, like, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Someone press the button. Alright, go. They're doing something. He's driving. Oh, she got it. Beep, 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 beep.
So, just as a little debrief, when coming up with your machine as a group, what active listening skills did you have to use in order to make sure that you could give us the final product? Brainstorming, yeah. What about brainstorming? Yes. Anything else? Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. True. Yes. Anything else? Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because if you don't know how one person's role is going to work, you don't know how they're going to work with you. Definitely. Anyone else? Cool. Okay, then also, what is the most challenging part of coming up with a machine like this and trying to figure out everyone's roles? Or was there a challenging part? Are you just guys really good at making machines? You guys are all engineers. Yeah.
Figuring out the parts and then like communicating like how specifically you want to act in that part.
Yeah, definitely. Anything else? Okay, we're gonna move on. So now we're gonna talk about clear self-expression. So you may be asking, what is clear self-expression? So the definition is making sure that what you say is understood by the people listening. And so when I say that out loud, it sounds like common sense, but it can often be misconstrued. And sometimes the way you communicate with someone, you're not always thinking about how they're taking it in and how they're listening to you. So that's a super important thing during camp. So this is kind of just our last section. So I thought it would be good for everyone to just kind of pair up. It could be either one person that you pair up with or two people, but talk through some ways, especially at camp. If some of our returners can kind of pair up with some of our new counselors, just so you guys can get a perspective from a returning member of how can you make sure that the way you're communicating with your campers can really like help them when they're trying to listen to you, and also vice versa. And when have you seen that in camp? So I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to pair with some people and talk through that. So how do you make sure that your campers can clearly express their opinions? Yeah? Cool. And break. So we're going to come back together, and not everyone has to say something, but I'm just going to just kind of go around the room. I want to get as many, especially from returners and even new counselors and cocoons, about just what you think about clear self-expression. It can be something that you can often overlook, but it's really important to remember when you're talking to your campers at camp and even at Friends and Family Day, like making sure that you're always doing this so that our campers feel as welcomed by you and know that you're listening and know that the way you're communicating is helping them to best understand what you're trying to say. So does anyone have any examples of how we can do that? Or just talk about what you were talking about, even if it doesn't like fully relate. What were you guys talking about in your groups? Yeah.
Almost adults and adults. So, but like when you're at camp, it's so important to be enthusiastic and be really into the songs, really singing, and it'll click for you. But if you feel awkward about it now, it won't feel awkward at camp. And just so it makes them more like comfortable and like fun and relaxing, kind of like it's okay to be yourself and like weird and goofy, kind of atmosphere to make it more easier for the campers to approach you.
Yeah, definitely. Anyone else? Yeah.
We talk one-on-ones if there's like a problem between like counselors and a camper or a camper and a counselor, and like how you go about it, especially if you're dealing with younger campers. We talked about how like being empathetic and direct are two really important parts of being a counselor. And also how like using your resources at camp, like other counselors that might have a really good relationship with that camper, like utilizing them as a resource, or also if that camper has family members at camp that they turn to a lot, maybe getting them to talk to them. But just kind of going over how like problems do happen, but they're like you can find solutions if you're just more creative.
Anyone else? Yeah.
We were talking about how like if you have a camper that's maybe not like super excited to do things, just like show how excited you are to do those things, because like odds are they're like just nervous about it or don't want to do it because they don't think it's cool. But like if they look up to you, then like they'll probably have the same views on things that you do.
We talked about how to like communicate to the whole unit as one. So first you want to make sure you have their attention. Just like last year, the residents would scream like "go go," and then the kids would respond "let's go go," and it like automatically gets their attention and they're not talking anymore and looking at you. Or like you can see everyone's eyes, that way like they're looking at you, and then you can convey short, very direct message. And just move on.
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, so I have just 4 tips to help you with this, and this can translate to pretty much whatever you do, whether it's, relationships that you have with people in KESM, relationships that you have with campers, when you're talking to them and communicating with them about whether it's a rule or whether it's what you're doing next, things like that, making sure that they feel as comfortable with you so that like everything can work smoothly at camp. So just the 4 things. The first one is starting with a positive comment about the activity or situation. So like many people said, making sure that your campers know that you're excited about it is a huge thing, because if you're not excited, chances are they're not going to be excited. They take on whatever energy you're giving off. So if you seem like you don't want to do the activity, they're not going to want to do it either. Secondly, ask questions. So it can be very easy to just tell people what you should be doing, or tell people the right answer, or tell people how to do something. But a way to make sure that they're actively involved and engaged in you is asking them questions. So maybe saying, what do you think we're doing next? Or like, you all have a schedule, or you saw it earlier, what do you think we're doing next? So that they're engaged and they're coming up with the answers, even if they're not always right. You getting them knowing that you're trying to get their opinion is really, really important. Third, maybe ask, what should we try and remember, or what are the rules? So if they're repeating back rules to you, if they're repeating back things that you said earlier in the day, it allows for them to keep retaining that information. So repetition makes people remember things. So if there's always a time that you're meeting, if you ask them like, what time are we meeting at the tree? And then they say 3 o'clock, they're going to remember it because you keep asking them those questions. And then number 4, rephrase, support, and clarify their answers and their questions as well. So if you're re-clarifying and making sure that you're fully understanding what they're trying to ask you, it'll help to kind of dissipate any misunderstandings that can happen from questions that they might not be asking clearly, or questions you may not be asking clearly. So that's clear self-expression. Most of these topics that we went over today, we could go over for like hours and hours on end, because there's so many things to know, but we're going to keep it short and cut it off here. So just, I think in conclusion, like, communication is so important, especially with your campers, but also remembering that the skills that you're learning, even here and when you're at camp, can translate to any part of your life. So whether that's communicating with professors, peers in your classroom, anything like that, it's really important to make sure that you're communicating effectively and listening to what people are having to say. So thank you guys for listening to me.